Alrighty. I am excited about our next speaker. I've just been reading through a bio to make sure I say everything correctly. And it's an absolute honor to have Miss Laurie James with us. Laurie James is a seasoned specialist offender, profiler, forensic criminologist, and certified security professional with a background in intelligence. She has an extensive experience in the assessment and profiling of violence, sex, financial, and cyber offenders. She frequently testifies as an expert witness in criminal trials. At present, Laurie is the managing director of CYBARETI Consulting Services Limited. She is focused on the development of effective cyber awareness and education tools to assist communities and law enforcement professionals to cope with emerging cyber threat, internet and social media-based threats and predation, including but not limited to cyber stalking, cyberbullying, and insider threat, a rapidly growing issue. CYBARETI Consulting Services is currently constructing an online learning resource platform for law enforcement professionals aimed at improving prosecution-focused investigation and operational security. Very interesting. The development of ViceCat profiling software will assist investigators through challenging investigations with checklists and support, enabling the sharing of critical information between law enforcement agencies in real time. Laurie regularly lends her expertise to organizations, governments, law enforcement, and the military, assisting them with the development of effective strategies and methods to manage incidents of crime and criminal behavior within their organizations. Laurie is a seasoned presenter at seminars and conferences globally, a well-established and regular guest on both local and international media platforms, as well as a best-selling author. And I need to know what books you wrote. I did ask you. And today, Miss Laurie James will be discussing the forensic science as a tool to counter terrorism. So without further ado, I will hand you over, and please enjoy. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll read them at the end. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, so firstly, I'd like to say good evening to everybody, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight. I hope this presentation will be of interest to you, and I hope it will also clear up some of the questions that you have or may have with reference to forensics. I'm just going to share my screen. Just let me share it first. So this presentation is going to focus on the use of forensic science in counterterrorism. We'll briefly cover some topics, including defining forensics, the application of forensics, the organization of forensics, an overview of some of the types of forensics. We'll define reactive and proactive forensics with some case studies. And then finally, there's not too much time, so I'll touch on some of the challenges, but there's not time to go into that too deeply. Okay, so the term forensic science. Sorry, I just can't see my own screen. The term forensic science, or forensis in Latin, means the public discussion or debate. It's in a more modern context, however, forensics applies to courts, the judicial system, and combining that with science and forensic science means applying scientific methods and processes to the solving of crime. From the 16th century, when medical practitioners began using forensic science, to writings in the 18th century that revealed the first evidence of modern pathology, to the formation of the first school of forensic science in 1909, the development of forensic science has been used to uncover mysteries, solve crimes, and convict or exonerate suspects of crime for hundreds of years. The extraordinary scientific innovations and advancements in forensic science have allowed it to become a highly developed science that involves a number of disciplines and thousands of forensic scientists specializing in everything from DNA and botany to dentistry and tool marks. The field of forensic science draws from a number of scientific branches, including physics, chemistry, and biology, with its focus being on the recognition, identification, and evaluation of physical evidence. It has become an essential part of the judicial system today. Forensic science may prove the existence of a crime, the perpetrator of a crime, or a connection to a crime through the examination of physical evidence, administration of tests, interpretation of data, clear and concise reporting, and the one element that still remains problematic, the truthful testimony of forensic scientists. And to that end, it's really, really important for a forensic scientist to always remain objective and remember that their duty lies to the court. Forensic science has become an integral part of many criminal investigations and convictions, with objective facts through scientific knowledge serving both the defense and prosecution arguments. Due to the highly complex field of forensic scientists are most often skilled in a particular area of forensic science, such as latent prints or question documents, trace evidence, or firearms, or like myself, profiling, but you can never wear all the hats. So it's very specific, and you need to stay inside of the ambit of your expertise and not stray, because once you do that, it's a slippery slope. Forensic scientists may be divided into three major groups. The forensic pathologist, these include your medical examiners and other professionals who oversee autopsies and clinical forensic examinations like rape examinations. Your forensic scientists, which include professionals working in law enforcement, the government, or private forensic laboratories, who are responsible for dealing with any number of specific tests and analysis, such as toxicology, ballistics, trace evidence, digital forensics, and so on. Associated scientists, these include scientific professionals lending their knowledge to forensic science, such as forensics odontologists, forensic botanists, anthropologists, and so on. These scientists apply their knowledge to forensic science field as to provide investigators with crucial information regarding everything from bite marks to insect infestation on the post-mortem body. So just to give you an idea, here are a whole bunch of different applications of forensic science. So you can get trace evidence, which is very, very important with counter-terror, your toxicology, psychology, podiatry, pathology, ophthalmology, linguistics, geology, entomology, engineering, anthropology, archaeology, DNA analysis, forensic botany, digital forensics, odontology, criminalistics, and forensic profiling. Also, there are very, very specialized fields in forensics like forensic accounting, forensic engineering, and forensic psychiatry, among others. And the one thing to remember about forensics, it is continually evolving. As modus operandi evolve, forensics has to evolve as well to counter the new modus operandi. So what are the differences between proactive and reactive forensics? So forensics generally is reactive. Forensic science, for the most part, has always been reactive and responsive to crimes which have been committed, deployed to the crime scene post-event in order to collect evidence, typically left at the scene of the crime. Proactive forensics does not wait for a crime to be committed, for it to be called into action. The aim of proactive forensics is to look for threats in advance. This is essential for counter-terrorism. Some of the aspects or traits of proactive forensics include, it's a fundamental shift in the viewing and scope and endeavor of forensic science. This approach to date has been suggested so far to only deal with really computer crimes. If you Google proactive forensics, you'll see you end up on a whole bunch of data forensic sites, but they don't really touch on the other fields too much. So the expression of proactive forensics in other areas to date has been very sporadic. People do suggest it, and then you find that the ideas fall away and they're not really followed through. Forensic science can be a powerful tool in deterrence and reduction of any crime, including terrorism. Forensic countermeasures can reduce the impact of terror attacks through containment. And proactive forensic scientists not only improve existing techniques or develop new ones, but they also try to foresee and predict future trends in future crime and develop preventative measures ahead of time. So we're going to go on and have a look at a really interesting case. Our first case study, which I want to look at proactive forensics, because this case was actually foiled by Israeli proactive forensics. Just to give you some background, Iman Razawi and her brother-in-law arrived in Tel Aviv from Nablus. Her husband was traveling with her, but his entry was rejected at the border. At about 1 p.m., 2 terrorists arrived in the central bus station. It was, and Razawi was directed by her brother-in-law to the busiest pedestrian entrance of the bus station. She panicked when she saw the stringent security search at the station's entrance. She dropped the bag and ran back to her brother-in-law. A security guard spotted her dropping the bag. He suspected it contained an explosive device and initiated Israel's evacuation protocol. Razawi told her brother-in-law that she had tried to drop the bag next to the entrance. He shouted at her and told her to go back and pick up the bag and carry it into the station through the security check. When she ran back and picked up the bag, 2 security officers and the police officer realized that she was the possible bomber. They turned to confront her. In response, she threw the bag away, turned and ran into the street leading to the old central station, a poor neighborhood mostly populated with foreign workers, where she last saw her brother-in-law, obviously trying to get back to him. While crossing the busy street, she was hit by a passing car and arrested. The IED was later detonated by the police bomb squad. So this particular attack responsibility was claimed by Fatah, and the perpetrators were Iman Razawi, together with her husband Asif Mohammed Hanif and Omar Khan Sharif. Quite funnily, we were discussing this a while ago, and somebody said, well, if he'd wanted a divorce that badly, he really didn't have to send her back to try again. In the attempted attack, we had a 5-kilogram nylon bags with TATP and frag camouflage in a bleaching case. So it was in that little aerial box. And as you can see, the station is very, very busy. So had this attack been successful, it would probably have killed 10 to 15 people and injured in excess of 100 people. The bleaching case was filled with screws and nails, and it was inside of the new bus station. So let's analyze how forensics played a part in this. So we had this very well demonstrates forensic profiling and the assessment of body language. So the major suspicious indicator was the excessive weight of the box. And they noticed this because she seemed to be struggling under the weight. Although she was carrying the item, the police officers actually said that she wasn't really showing any overt body language. She was dressed normally. She was behaving pretty normally. She looked a little stressed, but not too bad. So they watched her, but she wasn't too interested. But one of the things you will always react to as a forensic profiler is when somebody drops an item in a crowded area. And of course, in Israel, this is even more likely to be noticed. So she dropped the bag and she walked away. And that is a highly probable indication of serious security threat. What Israel does is they position spotters, all plainclothes spotters, all over their airports, their bus stations. If you ever fly on El Al, have a look at the security around El Al aircraft. It's very tight next to the security around other aircraft. So they position a covert non-uniformed security guard next to a security checkpoint to observe people's behavior and normal activities. And this proves to be very effective. The other reason that it's very effective and more effective than cameras is that you have your operational guy deployed on the ground. He's close, he can act, he can take action, he can apprehend, he can throw himself on top of the target if need be, saving lives. Another thing that you'll see in Israeli, they have bomb containment receptacles or protect tables on site. Now, if you have a look at those two images, the BCR container on the side, you can actually just dump the IED into the BCR and it will definitely contain the blast and save lives. The protect tables on the other side are quite interesting because they're on wheels. You can move them around. They're quite easily deployable. You can actually put the bag onto the top as indicated in this image, search it, and if you notice anything, you don't need to touch the bag again. You can just pull the blue slider away and it will drop into the containment vessel, which is pretty useful. And in that way, you can contain the blasts fairly easily. Of course, there's also X-ray and those sort of things as well. I mean, there's a lot of forensic countermeasures that you can deploy. And then the other thing is during a preliminary evacuation, the security guards stayed alert and they continued to look because in most IED attacks, there's usually two devices. So they continue to look, they continue to profile for suspicious activity. And it's that alertness that enabled them to identify the terrorist returning to the scene and foil her second attempt to bring the explosive device to the target. Okay, not specifically related to that case, but some of the forensic countermeasures that are proactive that can be deployed. As far as forensic profiling goes, body language analysis, the use of spotters. If you do geographic profiling, you can have a look at target hardening. The forensic profiling side of it also assists with crime linkage later on, and you can do proactive forensics profiling and reactive. So from studying previous terrorists, you can predict future behavior usually. Situational awareness, always a fantastic countermeasure. Today, there are many different types of surveillance systems. We are moving more and more towards drone technologies. And interestingly, the focus is now on anti-drone. So anti-drone is deployed to high-risk targets, oil and gas targets, critical infrastructure, airports. Now, these anti-drone technologies can actually identify drone. They read the drone signature. They will tell you if it's a registered drone, if it's an authorized drone, and they have the capabilities to destroy the drone should it be necessary to do so, because it's not just law enforcement using drones and military today. Terrorists can also get their hands on drones. So it's very important to make sure that you have anti-drone technology when you need it. So ballistic countermeasures, yes, safe BCR shield walls, things like that you can put. Another ballistic countermeasure is the tagging of explosives for both detection and post-blast, and of course, sniffer dogs. From a digital forensics point of view, the dark web, there's technologies now like Dark Tracer that will track and trace the dark web and generate intelligence reports. Of course, monitoring of social media, facial recognition, biometrics, all very useful and can be deployed onto the drone as well prior to an event happening. And then obviously trace evidence is always important. You know, no matter what, Lockhardt's principle will always tell you that when two objects come into contact with each other, they exchange trace evidence, and that helps a lot with the crime linkage aspects of things, linking the perpetrator to the crime, linking perpetrator to perpetrator as well. And there's actually a very interesting new tool being developed in Australia at Flinders University. It's a new counter-terror tool, which is specifically set up to deal with predictive trace evidence, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So here are some of the digital, the proactive forensic mechanisms that you can use. So we have the proactive digital forensics in those different categories. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go into that. Just to give you an idea, there's an anti-drone setup in the middle there on the white. And that consists usually of a detecting unit, a jamming unit, and a camera unit, and it's mobile, which is rather useful. And then obviously the sniffer dogs. Have a look at the bottom picture. Obviously the bottom picture is quite interesting. We have safe pass, which is a ballistic countermeasure as well. If you have a stadium or a big function, you can actually put people through the tunnel. And if there is a blast, it's fairly effective at blast containment at the very least. And then obviously there is new drone technology coming out all the time. There's an example of the new K1000 ULE unmanned aerial system. It's long range or autonomous drone. You can put it into the air and it'll stay airborne for up to 16 hours. And those, the benefits of drone, you get instantaneous geolocation, spectrum detection, electronic protection, information warfare, electronic warfare, and AI survey. So those are all extremely useful countermeasures. Okay, let's have a look at our case 2. So this was also a very, very well-known incident, and there's a lot of information available on the internet about Mike's Place in Israel. It's a pub in Tel Aviv, very, very high traffic pub. So this responsibility was claimed by Hamas and Al-Qassam Martyrs Brigade. It was 2 British terrorists, Asif Mohammed Hanif and Omar Khan Sharif. It was an IED attack with 2 suicide vests, and security guard Avi Tabib, who managed to actually throw himself almost on top of the suicide bomber, blocking him from entering the pub and, you know, avoiding further fatalities. So this, the picture at the bottom is what Mike's Place looked like after the attack. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background of Mike's Place. At 12:45 a.m. on Thursday, the 30th of April, the suicide bomber approached Mike's Place and blew himself up at the entrance. The force of the blast killed 3 people, injured over 50. One of the wounded was a security guard, who was actually Avi Tabib, and he managed to block it from further casualties. It was a suicide bombing, was a Palestinian attack perpetrated by Hamas. And it was very interesting. These 2 guys came across, went into their hotel, hung around in the hotel. There were maps found inside of the hotel where they had plotted all the high traffic tourist venues as well. And inside of the hotel afterwards, they found elastic belts, explosives, initiators, and a map of downtown Tel Aviv. with a lot of crowded venues on it. One must remember with terrorism, the goal is shock, and even injury is great for shock value because that victim stays alive. And from that victim being alive and probably having serious injuries and body parts missing and that sort of thing, the shock continues. If you have a look at this image here as well, you'll see a lot about the forensics. This little piece over here, if you can see my mouse, is actually the body of the perpetrator that actually ended up stuck on the wall. So what is the role of reactive forensics? Okay, so the critical elements of reactive forensics is the reconstruction of the incident, the establishment of the actual site of the explosion, the collection of all the various clues, and the search for live explosives material. It's critical in a post-blast investigation to establish what kind of explosives were used, how much explosive was used, how it was detonated, and how many people were killed and injured. It's also important to determine if it's a standard explosive or a manufactured explosive, because that will tell you more about the experience and the sophistication of the terror cell. Photographs are always very helpful in investigating explosions to identify the types of bombs and the bomb signature. With IEDs or improvised explosive devices, forensics generally look for bomb components, initiators, detonators, mobile phones, which are used to detonate the slides. That's always very useful to understand where the detonation device is. Of course, the more pieces of the IED that you can find, the more information. So another thing that's critical is the collection of bullets, rivets, and shrapnel. And then also the particular type or the container or the wrapping, the fuses and the circuits, which are often very specific to particular groups. Another very useful tool in post-blast investigation is sniffer dogs. Just to give you the demographics, a dog has a smelling capacity that is 40 times that of humans. They hear 20 times better than human beings, and their vision is 10 times better than human beings. So given their abilities, sniffer dogs can be very helpful in post-blast detonation investigations, particularly in combination with detection technologies. And where they are particularly useful is in deploying them to actually assist in the secondary attack, because most of the time there's two devices. The first, the target, the second, the targeting of the first responders. Another thing that's useful is blasts cause smoke residue, and when explosives burn, they emit some type of colored smoke that can indicate a particular type of explosive was used. Explosions often leave traces that can be found on hands and clothes, pockets, fingernails, underrings, or in skin creases. Some countries have been using taggants in certain kinds of explosives, and taggants are used to determine two things. They provide an indication of the people involved, and also you can tag them so you know which batch of explosives they came from. So silicon quantum dot sensors are also being explored for explosive taggant. 2.3 dimethyl and 2.2 dinitrobutane are the current tagging agents that are being explored. Yeah, with pros and cons. Another very useful reactive forensic is DNA profiling. So DNA has recently been given a great deal of credibility in investigations, and possibly 99% foolproof type of forensic evidence collected at any sites. So what type of evidence, biological evidence, and where can you extract it? mostly from fingerprints themselves and trace DNA extracted from fingerprints, from pathology, from anything that has contact with the body, a toothbrush, body fluids, shirts, any other clothing can be good sources of evidence. Documents, passports, disposable cups, you can pick up DNA from all of these things. And then there are new techniques under development as well with reference to DNA. So they now have DNA to identify possible suspects. Is an area of facial reconstruction is an area of active research. These technologies could be coupled with 3D printers, and this could change the dynamic of counterterrorism. India is already doing some constructs with facial recognition from skulls. Audio and video forensic analysis is also very useful in a new technique on voice dynamics and voice templates. If you have a data bank of voice samples from intercepts or for later comparison, that's useful. And software can enhance the signal in a low quality recording that is being used for closed circuit TV surveillance for comparison later on. From a psychological point of view, psychological forensic tools such as polygraph and other interrogation verification tools like brain fingerprinting, delayed voice analysis, behavioral profiling of people at airports, ports, bus stations, or areas of high traffic, forensic profiling investigative tools, profiling tools like my ViceCat program that's being developed that will assist in the profiling of violence and sex offenders, because there's often an interlink between that and terrorism, obviously for the financial side. Psychological autopsies of terrorists are useful. As I said, once you understand it, you can apply those profiles to the future. And body language assessment at ports is also critical. What does the future hold for forensics? I think it would be very useful to include non-lethal incapacitation technologies in forensics, especially in airports and ports and areas of high traffic. We need real-time friend or foe identification during incidents. What you have to remember is I've just put some photos there of people convicted of terrorism. And you can see that the faces of terror are many and they are changing. And there's no one demographic. So it's always really important to not, in profiling, we often get accused of racial profiling. So that has become, I mean, yes, it's still used and it has to be used in some instances, but that'll give you an idea that the demographics change. And at the moment with the recruitment, the way that it is on social media, anybody can be a terrorist. So it's important to realize that. So real-time friend or foe identification during incidents is critical. Remote observation of crime scenes by a team of experts is useful. And this will be improved by drone surveillance because it's mobile. Another thing is cyber forensics, which are being improved all the time. As I said, we now have dark web trawlers as well that allows us to monitor the dark web. Things like Dark Tracer, if you want to go and have a look, they have a great Twitter page and are doing amazing work. So yeah, that's great. And then things like massively parallel sequencing, which has revolutionized the field of genomics, enabling substantial advances from a human DNA profiling perspective. Another advent of MPS now allows biological signatures to be obtained from complex DNA mixtures and trace amounts of low biomass samples. So that you can go and research. It's Flinders University in Australia. So what they are doing is they are busy developing a proactive forensics tool that will assess trace evidence. So they will have and link that trace evidence that they can scan off of passports, people, clothing, whatever at airports. And that will link to sample previously contained collected samples. And you'll be able to go back and have a look at where those people have actually been traveling from the trace compared to the trace samples that have been collected geometrically. So you'll be able to trace the movement of people just by scanning that trace evidence. Challenges in the use of forensic science, just a few. International coordination mechanisms in the field of capacity building are always the problem. Research and development, we need more. Best practices need to be established. The training of forensic scientists is slow and costly. Gadgetry enhancement is always useful. And then the legal aspects need development, and the development of profiling tools we need, especially artificial intelligence driven for increased predictive capabilities. And then from the legal aspects, the data privacy laws, human rights laws, and the new woke culture is problematic, because what this woke culture is doing is making people afraid to ask questions in fear of being attacked. And this will impact, in my opinion, eventually on people's willingness to come forward with information. So previously reliable informer networks will be compromised. And that's my talk. Thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll take them shortly.
Wow. Wow, that was insane. Amazing. Really, really, really interesting. And because I have a particular interest in Palestine and Lebanon and Hamas, that was extra special for me personally as well. That was fantastic. I can't see any questions apart from one that Todd actually answered about Nelson.
Yeah, I also saw that in the beginning, and I wondered if people were going to make a distinction of, wait, are we saying he's a terrorist? No, but remember, things get political, and up until 2008, he was listed as a terrorist by the opposition party. He was in exile for a while. So I got the distinction you made. Yeah, go ahead.
It's actually really interesting that he is still on the, well, he's deceased now, obviously, but he was up on the terror watch list until he died in the US, interestingly enough.
Oh, we have got a question, I think. I'll just read through it. What are your thoughts on facial recognition technology? Is this the direction all police forces will be going internationally? I
think so. And if you have a look at New York, London, they are all under huge amounts of camera surveillance. So yes, I think smart cities and facial recognition will definitely become more increasingly used in the world. Yes, definitely.
Oh, we've got a great question as well from our very own Mr. Mohammed. How do LEOs balance the prevention of terrorism through profile individuals without being accused of bias through racial profiling? That's a great question.
Yes, that has been a problem. And unfortunately, you know, from an intelligence perspective, it's tricky. It's a bit of a minefield, but we continue to racial profile to a degree. I mean, it's pointless looking for certain terrorists in certain places, but and the concept is slated. So it is a bit of a minefield, but it is used covertly in any case in most instances. I think it's just a case of really keeping it off the radar for law enforcement and profilers.
Do you know, is there, you know, those two, the case study that you brought there, the two British people that came across to Israel, I'm getting that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there any cooperation and communication between profilers? So, for example, if these two people were being watched, for example, by MI5 or 6 in the UK, is there any profiling cooperation that heads these people up in international countries such as Israel to say these people are visiting you, we have profiled them, and so on?
Look, there is information sharing between intelligence communities, obviously, but the extent of that is quite interesting because mostly intelligence agencies work in silos, and that is one of the biggest challenges, is actually getting these information silos to cooperate with each other. And these countries to become more cooperative and to find a proactive way of facilitating information, because intelligence is always tricky. People want to share some stuff, but maybe not all stuff. And it's also, you don't want to give too much away, but you need to keep the world safe. So I think it's going to be quite challenging going forward in developing technologies where you can share the information you want to share, but perhaps not the more sensitive stuff that you want to keep away.
Yeah, I guess also because of the ever-changing face of terrorism as well, I suppose there's always a catch-up on it. So well,
yeah, and the other thing that people tend not to think about is that and in a lot of cases you have terrorists actually penetrating law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Mm-hmm. So the flow of information could end up in the wrong hands quite easily, especially if they haven't penetrated yet.
Wow, fantastic. Oh, have we got time for one more? Yeah. Can you expound a bit on the obtention of human DNA signatures from forensic evidence?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Okay, that's all it says actually. Can you expound a bit on the obtention of human DNA signatures from forensic evidence?
I'm not a forensic pathologist or a biometrics person. I'm a profiling. So I think if I try to expand on that too much, it's not my area of expertise. I would be stepping outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah, and as you said at the beginning, stay in your lane.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Have we got time for one more, Todd? Does one more just come through?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more, and that'll probably take us into a break.
This is from Lotfi in the UAE. Do you think the power countries like the USA and the UK, they change their strategies? They hunt terrorism ideas before they become plans on papers?
I think that's more of an opinion than it is a question.
It would definitely be more of an opinion, but I think profiling methodologies are very standard. We employ them very forensically, both pre and post. And I don't think so. We stick to the science. The science evolves slowly, and we try to meet all the ethical requirements involved in profiling, because obviously it's a very sensitive area for a lot of people.
Perfect. I think that's answered everyone's questions, including mine. Laurie, it's been an honor to listen to you. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone else has. We are going to go for a quick 10-minute comfort break right now, and then we'll come back to watch a couple of videos from Average Mohammed, and then we're going to go into our two other speakers for the evening. So a 10-minute comfort break, and we'll see you all back very soon. Thank you so much, and thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Okay. I can do tricky questions. Oh.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and
mute
stop
me,
your
please.
screen sharing. There you go.
Ah, now I'm back. I was lost.
No, you were on the side. It's okay. I think I can somewhat answer.
I'm not an expert in all of these things.
Yeah. I guess I'm fortunate. Our company's starting on this whole premise of virtual webinars and online coursework, and many people are, they just don't like it for some reason. But there's a large share of people that prefer this. They prefer the classroom and even the coursework like this, that they could do at their own pace. And Let me see, Mr. Abbasi said, do you think power countries like the USA, they change their strategies, they hunt terrorism ideas before they become plans on paper? So everyone's familiar with the EU's communication on the Economic and Social Committee. So, you know, the strategies for counterterrorism agendas, they evolve, right? I mean, operational guys, we use military doctrine. I've used military doctrine in stability and support operations and combat operations over the years, that everything changes as we adapt. We learn new things. And it's not until academia comes in, policymakers, who actually study all these things, and then that changes. For us, it's within the military, you know, we just train.
Yeah, and for us too, I think that's really the long and the short of it. For me personally, I come from a background of military and intelligence and that side of things. For me, it's second nature, and in an operational capacity, you use the tools available to you.
Yes.
And for maximum speed. Yeah. So the ethical side, unfortunately, does slip. And when you work where I work now is a lot in courts and criminal trials, and of course there it's a different environment. Yeah. It's much of a catch-22 if you're operational and you need to do things really quickly and you need to get a kidnapped victim back and you don't have time. You use whatever tools are available. Nobody cares. There's very little that you can't get away with. Whereas if you work in a court environment, it's very procedural and you have to follow the steps really, really carefully. So it's knowing when to apply which set of ethics, which again is a slippery slope.
Yes, yes. Well, Laurie, thank you again for joining us. We'll definitely be in touch here shortly after this. We have another seminar coming up at the end of next month with some.
Let me know the books. Let me know your books in LinkedIn, Laurie. I'm interested.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can send you a copy, free, gratis, and for nothing. I still have the original text when I wrote it on my laptop. So I'll send you the Word document.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
That way you don't have to buy it.
Privileged.
Oh, look at Stuart. He's using it. I'm a college student. I can't afford it. I eat ramen. Can you please send me that book? Good job, Stu.
There you go. No, it's not bad. It's just like I don't know if it's still in print, actually, to be quite honest with you. It was on Amazon.
Yeah.
A while ago, but I'm not sure.
Yep. Professor Kunle's Jordan's book is also on Amazon. Global Peace Book.
Oh, okay.
I think we have it listed on our website as well. We can list the book.
Mine was called Shattered Lives, the Story of Advocate Barbie. It was a very interesting trial on the first convicted female pedophile in South Africa, the whole case. So she was the first female to be taken up on the sex offenders register.
Oh, wow.
So it's the story of that whole trial and backstory. It was bizarre. Anyway, let me mute myself now.
Thank you so much for your time.